Greetings, everybody, and welcome to the Called2B Podcast, where we seek to empower everyday believers to discover and live out their authentic calling in Christ to be a greater blessing to the world around them. I am the Reverend Dr. Travis Guzzi. I'm a pastor as well as an ICF certified life and executive coach and a Gallup strengths coach. And we want to welcome you to this special once a month podcast conversations called Everyday Believers, where we seek to have conversations with everyday believers doing extraordinary things for the kingdom. For all those who are listening and viewing to this Everyday Believer conversation, I want to welcome all of you to Jon Kidwell, who seeks to develop mission-driven leaders. Jon, welcome to the Called2B Podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Travis. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, where are you signing in on? We've got you online here. Where's home for you?
So home for me is in Houston, Texas. I live here with my wife, Megan, and our three kiddos, Anna, William, and Benjamin.
Oh, wonderful. How long have you been in the Houston area?
We have been here in Houston for 13 years now.
13 years?
It was a 2-year stint that is continuing to go.
Yeah. Sometimes that works in life. Kind of what we think is going to be for a short term in life turns out to be much more significant.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, hey, Jon, for our audience who's tuning into this podcast, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself? And also, we'd love to hear a little bit about your faith journey as well.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much. So about me, and you heard wife and kiddos, and then beyond that, what I do for work is leadership development and really coaching and training for mission-driven leaders. And you might be asking yourself, what is that? So mission-driven leaders have this intense desire to do work for good causes, right? These things that we would say matter. It could be preventing child abuse. It could be sharing the gospel. It could be restoring homes from disaster. But when our heart just grows for the things that we care about, and we're driven by that, it's that mission-driven leaders also prioritize loving and serving their people, those that work with and for them, and those that they serve. And then mission-driven leaders know the value of applying the skills and best practices that the Bible will give us and that business will show us so that they can deliver excellent results because their people need them and their mission deserves it. And so I get to do that every single day by going to work with people and places to develop the leaders that they have so that they can continue to lead and succeed at their life's mission.
So it sounds like anybody who's really seeking to make any kind of a significant impact in the world, in business, social impact, kingdom impact, those are the kinds of people that you're seeking to invest in.
Yeah, we talk about life change, somebody that's going out to do work to change the life for another in a positive way.
Oh, that's fantastic. Very good. Yeah. And tell us a little bit about your faith journey as well that's kind of led you to this point.
Do we have 3 or 4 hours here to be able to go through?
You can give us the Cliff Notes version. That would be helpful.
Version. Yeah. All right. So I grew up in a wonderful, loving home that follows God, and like many, I was doing church and figuring out what that meant for me. And I would tell you that through high school and college, I was challenged to figure out what that meant to own and internalize my faith and my personal relationship with God. And when I left college, I had a wonderful pastor. He's great godly man. His name's Greg Finke. And he challenged me to really start to own it myself. And that was the start of it. And even there, it took a number of years for me to let go of a bunch of the things that I believed were perceptions or picturesque things that I needed to hold before really submitting and saying, the thing that I want and value most is a personal relationship with my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And if that means that I have to do something that makes me uncomfortable because it brings me closer to Him, then that's what I'm going to do. And I would say that journey for the last 15 years has been the most impactful thing in my life, being able to look at what's the most uncomfortable thing that's going to bring me closer to Him. And He keeps pushing me in those directions.
Yeah. Greg Finke's a mutual friend of ours, and we had Greg on one of our previous podcasts and had some conversations about helping empower everyday believers to discover and live out their calling. One of the questions I always know Greg asks is, how's God messing with you? That's like one of his favorite questions. And, especially coming from Texas, that's a very Texas kind of way of saying that. And,
that's right.
Sounds like he kind of challenged you to be thinking in those kind of terms as well.
Oh, he absolutely did. He took the time, right? I think about how he takes the time to see and be with people. And he took a young kid out to lunch at a place that he never would have imagined. And I was thinking, this guy is pastor of a big old church at a big old place doing big old things. And why is he taking me to lunch, right? Yeah. And he was taking me to lunch because that's what God had endeavored for both of us to do at that time. And then also so that he could poke a little bit and prod and basically say, how's God messing with you? You should check that out and you should see what's going on. And God did that moving down here to Texas. God did that when I left teaching to go work for the Y. And God did that when my time at the Y ended and I was laid off. And he messed with me for a bunch of months before my wife and I were finally sitting down after just going through, where are we supposed to go? Is this the place we're supposed to go? We had some opportunities that were laid in front of us that were good and fine opportunities, but it wasn't the thing, right? It wasn't where we felt God moving and prodding. And it was one of those prayerful, crying coffee conversations where it said, I said to my wife, I believe that I am supposed to help leaders be better leaders. Yeah. God has prepared that and prepared me to do this. I've been doing this since I've been being prepared for this since I was 16 years old, and probably well before that. But that's when I start to remember that I've been being prepared for this. And so let's get about the business of figuring out how to do that God's way.
Yeah. Hey, Jon, I'd love to kind of explore with you, because I know it was not necessarily a straight line that led you into what you're doing right now.
But I believe it looks something like this, right?
Yeah, typically that's the journey for a lot of people. What led you into, and I'd really like kind of get in the background of this, what led you into what you're doing now of developing mission leaders and doing the coaching that you're doing?
So I think that many of us find that we have natural inclinations to lead. We are able to build relationships. We're able to solve problems. We're able to see things that others can't, or we're able to help people do something that they weren't otherwise able to do. And I've always had that gift or ability, if you will. And years later, found out that it's one of the spiritual gifts that I have. Leading, teaching, and generosity are the top three that I have in my life. And so kind of figuring that out and then figuring out, well, how do I use that, right? And I would tell you that at times in my career, I was using that for myself and making myself feel better, or doing it because, it was about the ego or the pride, or if I do this, then people are going to see me this way, or if we're able to do this thing, then I will be able to get this. And I was challenged by another great person that said, that wasn't right for you, and you only wanted it because of the title. And I was like, oh, that struck pretty deep. And so that is one of the instances along this journey where I've really been challenged and wrestled with and gone to God with, so often when we're doing these good and right things to deliver life change, sometimes we get in the way of that and what is most ultimately possible. And I've been shown that by wonderful, loving, caring, and direct people. And I've also been shown that by a loving God that has put me on my knees and said, hey, I wrote this entire book so that you would read it, so that others would read it too, but so that you would read it and you would know my heart and how this is going to work out the best, right?
Yeah.
And so
I think that's one of the maturity things, though, is that, a lot of times when we start off, it's really about us. It's a very self-focused, my dreams, my visions, my strategies, and look what I've created. And I think that maturity that God takes us on is to strip us of ourselves, where it's not so much about us, but it becomes about others. I know in Clifton Strengths terms, we talk about how to move our talents from the basement up to the balcony. In the basements, it's dark. It's kind of a scary place. But when our talents can be used to love and serve others, that's where it's up on the balcony. It becomes something that's shining and life-giving rather than it being all about me.
Yeah. And that's why I love mission-driven leaders and where their heart is because in my life, what I found and what I believe that the Bible points us to is that when we're not doing this for the end result of being something for us, but when we are giving our life away to a higher purpose, to something that we were made and called to do, something that is for life change and benefit and service in other people's lives, that's really the path that then we can say, okay, I can put me aside to do these things, and I can do all of these things for the benefit and love of another. And I love how mission-driven leaders have that at the core, and sometimes it's just digging in and figuring it out. You asked me another question about why coaching. Well, two things really is one, I had some tremendous leaders that showed me the path of how best to lead and coach. I'm an advisor at heart. I would love to give you advice all day. I know that that's not the only thing that people want or need, and oftentimes that doesn't go so well. And
at the end of the day, by the way, who's the bad guy if it doesn't go well? It's you who gave the advice, right?
Yeah, it is a tremendous burden to bear when you think that you must advise everybody. And so what I found is that's one tool in the arsenal that is a great way to love and serve people. Another one is mentoring and counseling and frankly, just sitting there and being proximate with people. Coaching is another one of those. And then the more that I looked into, okay, if we're really going to build and equip and inspire leaders on biblical principles and practices, how does that work? Jesus was a tremendous coach, right? We may call it discipleship inside the church. It's the same thing, really. You're sitting there building a relationship with people. You are asking them questions about what's going on. What are they thinking? How might this work best? What are you going to go try? And let's evaluate how that went. And then let's circle back on the things that we need to circle back on and keep going on those that are going well. And how do we then support each other in this? And so inside of that was really one of the things that took me into it was a number of great leader coaches in my life and the example that Jesus gave us, calling it discipling and coaching seems to be pretty close with that.
Yeah, that investing in others, I know for Jesus, he was on the earth for those 3 years of his ministry, but he knew there was a time in which he was going to die, to rise again, to ascend. Just had Ascension Sunday just recently, and he had to prepare his followers to be able to be the church. He's the foundation, but he had to get them ready. And it's kind of that whole give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. And, giving advice is kind of like giving that fish. But Jesus needed to do more than that. And so that investment in them. By the way, there was a book, I love it. It's a short little read. I don't know if you've ever read it, but it's called Jesus Asked by Conrad Kempf. And it talks about, we think of Jesus as the great teacher, but, a lot of Jesus' ministry was telling parables and asking questions. And that powerful question that you can ask people that begins to deepen awareness, that creates capacity, that moves them either towards the kingdom, Jesus and the kingdom, or away from Jesus and the kingdom. But a good, powerful question can never leave you where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the power that you get to have as a coach. You listening, asking questions, being there for people. That's a tremendous blessing that we can bring to others who are asking those questions. What am I supposed to be doing? How can God use me? And what impact am I supposed to make?
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Well said.
Yeah. Let me ask you, Jon. So that journey into what you're doing now of developing mission-driven leaders was not, as we talked about, not necessarily a straight line. That there was kind of some struggle and some transition that you went through from working for the why to what you're doing now. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey and how was God in that and working through that to bring you to where you're at now?
Yeah. So I was laid off in July of 2020. And this was a profession in a place where I believed that I was going to have my entire career play out there. and that I was going to work and lead and serve at a high capacity and go on to be a high capacity leader for the movement there, for the Y movement. And God had other plans. Mm-hmm. And so got laid off, and then really didn't know what was next. I had wrapped up my purpose and who I was and how I went about life so much into that it took a while to unravel that. And so I always say that there's this plush blue chair in the office. And I sat there for 4 months and applied for jobs and interviewed and, by the grace of God, had people call and offer me things. And so we would go and test those out, and we're sitting there like, are we a Jonah not wanting to leave Houston? Or is this a time of Moses being in the desert? And it's like, I don't know, right? And I can use those two examples, but this is a time that God has you working through it. So, don't put so much pressure on yourself that you're either in the wilderness or being disruptive to God's plan. Like, why don't you just sit and be still and figure it out? And in that, sometimes you got to work it out too. So we're writing frameworks and building business plans. And the thing that just always kept coming back was that there was some sort of leading and teaching. And I didn't know it yet. I have a big heart for 17 to 29-year-olds. And I thought that maybe that was the space that we were going to go into. And it turns out it wasn't. I would be on fire for that for 3 weeks, have it all built out, see the next 17 to 35 years of what that was going to look like and how that was going to work. And then overnight, like a light bulb, it just got turned off, right? And so continuing to wrestle, continuing to struggle, really what God was doing was saying, you need to work this out, right? Just like leaders, not for selfish reasons, but you have to work on me before you can lead before we can lead us. And if you're going to do this, you have to go in and figure out what's going on. And I had to work through releasing some resentment from being let go from the organization that I loved, and had to let go of some of the things that I was going to get in the way of the work that God wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And then even stepping into it, which was a tremendous act of faith. And we could talk about how it was a business and that there wasn't money that came into the business at first. And that, by God's grace and providence, things just continued to find a way to work out. And we'd get a new client when we needed a new client, or we'd have kind generosity of family and friends in ways that they have no idea that just came at the right time. And so it was in all of that God continued to prepare and refine. And even once we went, there's still been a preparation, a refining, hey, you did that. And that's a good and right thing to do, but it's not your thing to do. So don't do that again. Yeah. Whether that's a strategic plan or whether that's working with board development, it's, hey, here's what I've called you into. I've called you in to work with leaders. I've called you in to work with their teams, and I've called you in to work with them as they move through change. And because I've put you in places where you've had to lead, where you've had to teach, and where you have moved through a tremendous amount of change. I had 7 jobs in 6 years with the Y, and was able to have the honor and privilege to lead and guide people through that. And that's a difficult thing. And so that's what's prepared me to do what I'm doing today.
Yeah. I know it was my experience too, was my even getting into coaching came from a wilderness experience of having to leave a job, a ministry. And then it's that time in which, and it's a necessary time sometimes that needs to happen, is for our dreams have to die in order for God's dreams to be born. And sometimes that takes a time of, whether it's wilderness experience, or I also like to talk in terms of crucible moments where God melts us down and he remolds and he reshapes us. And it's not that the experiences that we had from our past, like what you had with the Y, were wasted. God takes them and he refines them and he redeems them, and he's all those are preparation for what he has next for us.
And I think, as you said, crucible moment, I think that retreat is part of figuring that out. Like you said, there's breadcrumbs of all of these are useful, and all of these have been a preparation and a redemption for the will and the purpose of God, right? And for what we've been called and created to do. And And sometimes it's stepping back and just sitting and listening and praying and seeking out that still small voice to say, how do these dots connect?
Yeah.
And how am I supposed to use them? And I often remind myself because as one that, I work with mission-driven leaders, driven in achievement and all that, they're just wired in, right? And so for me to take those step back or to sit in that chair for 4.5 months and wrestle, that's some of the harder work where some of us could sit there and be like, it sounds great to sit in that chair. I'd be like, no, I did an entire renovation of the backyard because I had to go dig something up, literally and figuratively. But I had to make sure that I was doing something. But I say that to say, I remind myself that Jesus' ministry started in the wilderness where he was tested, right? And where he spent time with God before going out. And I remind myself often that we put the Sabbath first. We rest so that we can run, and then after we run, as Jesus did, whether he was teaching, whether he was healing, whether he was in there with the disciples, he had no problem retreating to say, I need to pray and I need to rest, right? And those are good things, and there's a rejuvenation and this kind of recreation that comes out of that.
Yeah. I think for any of us who are mission-driven leaders and we're used to speaking and we're used to doing that's a challenge to just be still and know that God is God.
Yeah.
And to let him work things out in his time. And that's the challenge is there is God's perfect timing. And sometimes we can rush it. It's kind of like trying to sneak in and try to eat the cake or the cookies before they're completely done. We want it now. And just to be still on God's timing for him to be God and to work it out and for us to recognize there's growth, there's trust, there's dependence that we need to happen before God's dreams are ready for us to step into.
Yeah, a model that I've adapted with the leaders that I work from others, and really from many tremendous great things. But the way that I say it is that transformational growth that we're looking for and that God provides is grace and truth over time, plus the intentional actions that we take multiplied by God.
That's great,
and that's what gives us our transformational growth.
That's great. So Jon. How do you go about supporting and developing mission-driven leaders through coaching, through mentoring, and all the other things that you do in your practice?
Yeah. So what we focus on today is really that coaching and training aspect. And so whether it's working with an individual leader or an executive coaching, or executive transitions, helping people find the job and the mission that they're meant to do, or transition from one role to another inside of an organization. Those are two aspects of working with individuals. And then with teams, we'll go in and do training. But one of the things that was most impactful for my life and what I have found is most impactful for organizations is when we can actually go in and do team leadership coaching, where we can get in there with this small community of leaders that are charged to lead others and deliver excellent results. And we can build the relational connections we need. We can improve the communication. We can work on decision making. We can do all of these things on a biblical foundation where they have the support, the alignment, the candor, the trust that they need to be able to go out and love and serve well at the highest potential that they possibly can. Those are some of the most fun ways. We do get to go in and do training, or I get to go in and speak at some places, but most of it is working with that individual or coming in and working with teams of 4 to 7 and doing that, the blend of teaching and coaching that I love doing so much.
Yeah, the joke in pastoral ministry is ministry would be great if it wasn't for the people.
I think that'll preach.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of leaders who probably would say the same thing. Being a leader would be great if it wasn't for the people, but you can't be a pastor. You can't be a leader without people. And so, many times it's not just the knowledge, the hard knowledge that we have or the technical skills. It's that soft skill. It's the emotional intelligence of how to be a leader. What do you feel are some of the things that leaders are needing most and to work on most to be effective? Because again, you can't just do it by yourself. You need to be able to work others to have the impact that God is often calling us to. Where do you really especially put in focus and help leaders to be able to grow?
So for me, at most of the times in my leadership, I have this beautiful picture of how it is going to work, what it's going to look like, and what that result is going to be. And then oftentimes I fall short of being able to deliver at the level of clarity and vision and just execution that I might be able to see so clear in my mind. And I think that a whole lot of us have that. We're able to see it. We have this ideal vision. And then there's this gap where that keeps us from it, right? The reality that we're in. And what I found in myself and working with others is that gap is often where we are controlled by other things, whether they are internal forces or external forces, whether it is my need to please people or my desire to avoid conflict, whether it is my inability to step into the comfort, or whether my ego and my pride won't let me say that thing because I'm going to look silly, or they're not going to appreciate it at the level that I think it is, or I don't know if this is going to go perfect and how this is going to reflect, and so I'm just not going to do it. And so really to lead in our purpose with love, it's figuring those out, and it's getting free from those forces that are internal and external. And like I said, it could be ego, it could be pride, it could be our need for money and possessions, it could be substances, and sometimes it's just our own personality and the level of comfort or protection that we seek instead of fully giving of ourselves for the people that we're trying to serve. And so it sounds like time in there.
Yeah, it sounds like it's looking for that interference that's getting away of the potential of who we can be and who God can use us to be.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Jon, I know that your faith informs your calling in developing mission leaders and to be a coach. How do you see God working through you in order to be that greater blessing to others in discovering and living out being a mission-driven leader?
I think as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, I don't know that he is, right? My first triggered response was, well, no, I don't see it the way that I want to see it. And so perhaps he's not, or perhaps I'm not doing something right. And then just sitting here now, it's, what's actually the most interesting is, I don't only, and I don't solely work with folks that are Christian. And as people start to ask questions or start to say, wow, that was really, really, really smart. Like, that just makes sense. Where'd you come up with that? It's like, I didn't. That's from the Bible, right? The Bible tells us to write out a vision, make it clear so that others may run. It's good business practice too. It's great leadership practice, but that's from the Bible. Or they start to ask me questions about my faith. And so I think one of the ways is just in small, intimate relationship with an individual or with a small group of individuals. And the other thing is the stories that folks are sharing with me of inspiration to do something similar in their life or in their work. And that's a wonderful thing to hear. Is like, wow, you're doing this and I can do this, or I can say this in my work. And that's a wonderful byproduct and to the glory of God. And I would say that I think my role is to show up and God's work is to do God's work. And so I think he's blessing other people by just putting me in places where I'm supposed to show up and where I go into each coach or training or speaking event and really finish with, I don't know where we're completely going to go with this, but God, I trust you. Fill me with your spirit. Take me where we need to go today.
Yeah.
And then let him do his work.
So it sounds like, one, it's recognizing God's with you.
Yeah.
Being available, being a trusted, I think that especially coaching, that trusted relationship is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And so when somebody can put their trust in you, and then, the coaching process is just an interesting one, because I don't know about you, but man, when I coach somebody, they get into the deep questions of life. Who am I? Why am I here? What is life about? What impact am I supposed to make? And it creates a spiritual searching, whether they realize it or not. And that's the wonderful thing I've discovered, where, as a pastor, a lot of people think, when I wear my pastor hat, it's like, well, you're here to tell me something or get me to do something. As a coach, they see me as just somebody who's here to help them. And it's just in that listening, asking questions, the presence, that it creates a spiritual stirring that then it opens them up to say, hey, tell me more. Where are you finding answers? And we're invited into a conversation rather than trying to force our way in. And that's where I see God start stirring and working. And I know for me, I bathe it in prayer, just asking for God to be in there and create those moments as well, where I don't have to force it, but they just develop naturally.
Yeah. Yep. And I think you said something that just made me realize that some of it is merely how you show up and how you respond. And so oftentimes you're in there and you're coaching or you're training, you're doing the work, and then there's the conversation after the conversation where it's the pleasantries, and they're like, how are you so calm? How are you not stressed about this? How are you able to confidently walk in this thing that you have no idea how it's going to turn out? And that's where you hear the question behind the question, which is, this is my opportunity to step in and say, it's actually not me. It's the fact that there's Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, who died for me and loved me so much, and my place in His kingdom is secure. And that's what allows me to stay on solid ground even when everything else is shifting. And I'd love to talk about it if you want to.
Yeah. Jon, let me ask you, and I know in coaching there's confidentiality, so I don't want you to break any confidentiality at all, but is there any story, either specifically, maybe you have permission, or in general, where you really saw God use you to have an impact in somebody else? I'm sure you've got a lot of stories, but one that you might be able to share with our listening and viewing audience.
Yeah. So we will change names for the sake of the guilty, right? And no, I'm just kidding. Wonderful, wonderful person, and I have someone that is very near and dear to me, and it's a wonderful coachy relationship, and it's also one that I get to call friend. And this person wrestles with some real demons and with some real addiction. And I have been able to see God work systematically on this person's heart, and a softening and a changing of reliance on those things that they are addicted to, into just walking in calm and peace and confidence and serving others. And hopefully we can get to the point where they can give themselves some grace too along the way. But just tremendous change, and how that translated into their organization is they're a much more stable organization. They're a $8 million organization that in 11 months added $1.1 million into the organization by paying off debt, by growing their service area and the revenue that comes with excellent service and serving more people. And so these things matter first and foremost personally, but also for those of us that are on mission and doing good, right work for life change. It shows up there too. It's a residual impact and benefit for that work and for leading well.
Yeah. So it sounds like not just when you have effective leaders, but healthy leaders, that it creates a domino effect of healthy teams and a healthy organization as well.
Yep.
That's awesome. Jon, one of the things that we do in this podcast is, I often, with everybody we have here, want to ask the question, so we may have some people who are listening and viewing who are thinking about getting into certain callings and vocations. I do a lot of coach training, so I hope that some of the folks that I do coach training with are here, and I know that they're processing through maybe making the leap into becoming a coach, not just part-time or part of what they do currently, but maybe even vocationally making a change into doing this on a full-time basis.
Yeah.
What advice would you give for somebody who's in that process of trying to determine if leadership development training coaching is right for them as a vocation?
I would encourage them to start today, and to start for free, and to start with your friends and family, and to start figuring it out by researching and applying, right? Learn, do, and then teach somebody else. And that's a wonderful pattern for starting. When I was doing that, like sitting in the chair, wrestling with all this stuff, I just kept getting people that would call and be like, "Hey, can you help me with this? Can we talk through this? Can we do this?" Now, I had already been trained as a coach and knew that was something that I enjoyed doing, and did that as a part of the way that I led, and a part of the way that I helped our organization and our movement when I was with the Y. And I just started doing it, and started doing it, and started doing it. And you figure out that you really have this sense of, oh, maybe I enjoy it, and maybe people call because I'm good at it. And maybe I'm wrestling with these things because I'm not stepping into it. And so I wouldn't say sit and ponder it for 4 years. I would say start testing it out really, really small, really, really safe, but start today. And then from there, I think you go and you get the training or the certification that you need to be able to do what you want to do, and then take that next small step, and then that next small step, and figure out what you're going to need to make sure that you are safe and secure with that leap when it comes. I wish that we would have had a smoother transition. I wouldn't be where I was, so I'm not going to go back and change anything.
Right.
But that 8-month gap of not knowing where the next paycheck's coming from is a scary thing. So if in your practice you can prepare for making the leap, whether you find out it's that or something else, it's a wonderful, wonderful time to start.
Yeah. And it sounds like for you, you kind of were forced to jump in the deep end of the pool in some ways, but for others, they may have the luxury of maybe testing the waters, dipping their toe in. I know that's how I got into coaching. Now I was, kind of in that in between as well, but for me, I started with friends and family. It's like I had people in my life. I'm like, hey, I'm getting trained as a coach. Would you mind if I practice on you? I'll buy you a cup of coffee. Let me, and they were like, yeah, sure. Because people want to help. And they found that they received benefit from those conversations and that clarity that came out, and felt more empowered. And then they started telling other people, and I started getting invited as well. And I think that's a great way to start with those who are close. Be that blessing, utilize the skills, and then see where God takes you in that.
Yep.
That's awesome. Hey, Jon, if people want to find out more about you, maybe they've got some questions. And by the way, I also know you have a podcast of your own. Give you a chance just to plug that here for a second. What is the podcast? Where can they find that?
It's called Leaders on the Move, and it's about leading change and how we can do that in ourselves, in our life, and in our communities, and to benefit those that we serve. And you can find it, Leaders on the Move, on Apple or Google or wherever you go find podcasts. But it's myself and my co-host Jake Steger, and so it's fun. We talk with nonprofit, with business, with church leaders, those that are really mission driven about how we can best do this thing and how we can lead change for the benefit of others. So please check that out. And if you are looking to connect with me, jonkidwell.com. Can't hear the H, so I don't spell it with the H. It's just JONKIDWELL, jonkidwell.com. And then on most of the social platforms, it's Jon Kidwell, and you'll find me.
Very good. Hey, Jon, thank you so much for the conversation today. I always appreciate connecting with another coach and hearing their journey and hearing, I think each coach has kind of their unique niche and the people that God has called them to. And yet there's a very similar heartbeat of wanting to invest in others, to see them grow and develop, to find their calling and make that greater impact in their life. And just to really appreciate hearing your story. And thank you so much for your willingness to share that with our listening and viewing audience today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. And for our listening and viewing audience, we want to thank you for joining us for this everyday believer conversation where we have these conversations with just everyday believers, but yet God has called them in unique ways to make their own unique kingdom impact with where they are and the gifts that God has given to them. And so thank you. We have some calls to action. One is check out Jon's podcast, reach out to him if you have any questions, and maybe he can help you in bringing focus in being a more effective mission-driven leader. Also, too, we want to encourage you to listen and view, but also like and share this podcast. Also, we have a Facebook group, the Called2B Podcast. Join us on that. Join in the conversation as well. And perhaps maybe for a special call to action today, maybe you're interested in being trained as a coach. I want to encourage you to reach out to me, either message me on Facebook or send an email to me at called2bpodcast@gmail.com. Maybe you're interested in finding out more about being trained as a coach. We have a partnership with Coach Approach Ministries. We would love to get you involved in our introductional CAM 501 Foundations of Christian Coaching training, and getting you some of those basic skills and learning what coaching is, and start dipping your toe in the pool of how you can utilize this either in your ministry, your business practice, or maybe even as Jon has done in taking that leap into becoming a coach yourself. So reach out to me. I'd be happy to tell you a little bit more about the coach training that we provide. It's all online, and so no matter where you are in the country, it'd be easy to get you involved in one of those. As always, we want to thank our sponsors. We want to thank Malem and the Southeastern District for their generous donations that have made this podcast possible. And with that, I want to wish you all God's richest blessings, and we'll catch you next time for our next Called2B podcast. Take care, everybody.